learners, and welcome to another session on Block 3, Unit 3 of BSW 044. Now, in the previous class, we talked about displacement, and now we will take on what is migration a little bit more in detail. In the previous class, let me just sum up so that you do not forget, we discussed displacement and the people affected by displacement. We also highlighted how displacement and tribals are synonymous with each other and the impact of displacement on livelihood. We also discussed about the problems around the rehabilitation policy and the need for an alternative policy. Now, having summed up all that what we did in the previous class, let us now go ahead and understand migration. Now, according to M.S. Rao, migration is a shift in the place of residence for some length of time. While it excludes short visits and tours, it includes different types of both voluntary and involuntary movements. Examples of involuntary movements are migration under such as crisis as war, transfer of population, riots, floods, droughts, and earthquakes. It also includes marriage migration, virolocal, urilocal, and neolocal, and transfer migration. When you talk about transfer migration, when you talk about marriage, many people shift from their place of residence to destination of their husband or their in-laws. And for job migration, many people shift from one point A to point B in search of livelihood and sustainability. Now, there are other situations of migration where movement is part of people's earning a livelihood. There are nomads, shifting cultivators, itinerant traders and salesmen, artisans as well as laborers. Because now you see when there's a season, when there's a summer season in, let's say, the metropolitan city, you have hordes of laborers coming from different parts of India to a certain place where they look for work, like masons, the carpenters, the painters, all this kind of people. Now, transhumans is a special type of migration between two sets of settlements in different seasons. Now, internal migration is related to the international migration, either overseas or overland. The latter creates imbalances in certain regions in labor supply, and internal migration comes as an answer. For instance, in Punjab, continuous waves of overseas migration to England, United States, Canada, and now to Gulf countries have created a shortage of labor, and this gap is filled by migrants from Jharkhand, Bihar, and Uttar Pradesh. Migrants from Jharkhand include significant percentage of the tribals. However, international migration needs to be studied in its own right. There are immigrants from Tibet who have been rehabilitated in different parts of India as well. In this class, we are going to focus primarily on the internal migration, that is migration within India. We are not going to take on international migration because it's another topic of debate. Now, there are also migrants from Nepal and Bangladesh, both legal and illegal, which is the case everywhere, and they need to be studied from the point of view of adjustment. Another aspect of international migration is the question of return migration and repatriation of Indian overseas migrants. For instance, there were about 80,000 Tamil repatriates in Tamil Nadu in 1986. International migration is a part of global social system of flows of communication, capital, resources, goods, and services which have development consequences for both sending and receiving countries, including social and economic conditions, population stocks, and population flow. Now, Rao observes that there are two aspects of migration. First, what happens to the migrants in the place of destination, how they adjust themselves, and the kind of social consequences that follow. Now, second is what are the feedback effects of migration in the place of origin of the migrants. The continuing interaction process between the place of origin and the place of destination is an essential aspect of migration study as well. Now, in the view of Rao, a cultural interpretation is important in gaining deeper understanding of the process of migration. Of all the social scientists interested in migration, economists have been the foremost in advancing theories to explain migration flows. migration is considered to be a function of labor reallocation in response to market demand, so that the demand and supply of labor are always in equilibrium. Now, if you say the demand is more and the supply is less, then it also hampers the economic situation and vice versa. Migration is also considered as an investment in human capital involving cost-benefit analysis at different levels. At the individual level, it is argued that migration is based on careful calculation involving money and non-money, which is probably a psychological cost, we could say at the least. While some economists do consider the importance of non-economic factors in explaining migration, others assume that the individual is a rational economic man interested in maximization of profit or utility, and it is the poor who move out attracted by higher wages. The limitation of this theory is that it does not explain why, among people placed in the same economic circumstances, some migrate and others do not. Secondly, it does not explain why people who are economically sound also move to other cities. So, economic consideration does not wholly explain why people migrate. Probably people have different reasons. So, that is why we call it migration. They provide only the necessary conditions for people to migrate. The sufficient conditions are provided by non-economic factors, which explains how migrations occur. Now, talking about internal migration, internal migrants in India constitute a large population, and by more recent estimates, around 326 million or 28.5% of the population comprise of migrants. Lead source states of internal migrants include Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, Uttarakhand and Tamil Nadu, whereas key destination areas are Delhi, Maharashtra, Gujarat, Haryana, Punjab and Karnataka. Now, there are conspicuous migration corridors within the country: Bihar to National Capital Region, Bihar to Haryana and Punjab, Uttar Pradesh to Maharashtra, Odisha to Gujarat and Odisha to Andhra Pradesh and Rajasthan to Gujarat. So, these are the kind of major corridors that is happening, that is where the migrations are happening. Now, migration in India is primarily of two types. The first one is long-term migration, resulting in the relocation of an individual or household for a long period of time, and that's why the term long-term. And the other one is short-term or seasonal or circular migration involving back and forth movement between a source and destination. Estimates of short-term migrants vary from 15 million to approximately around 100 million. Yet, macro surveys such as the census fail to adequately capture flows of short-term migrants and do not record secondary reasons for migration. Now, having talked about migration, let us understand what are the reasons that people migrate, like what are the push factor, because we know that migration involves two factors, that is a pull factor and the push factor. So, let us know what is the push factor. Now, when you talk about push factor, I would like to list down some of them. The first one is an unemployment in the place of residence. If there's unemployment, there's no job, then they are pushed to other states to go and seek for employment. The second one would be lack of service opportunity. Now, everyone, whoever is earning, is looking for better life conditions or better quality of life. So, you would like to look for better service opportunity. So, that also pushes you out of your hometown to look for a comfortable place in the other region. Second would be conflict, where the hometown or your place of residence is full of probably ethnic conflict or regional conflict, language conflict, or whatever kind of conflict. You would want to go away from that place and settle in a much more peaceful area. Second would be poor security. That is one of the most important. If the women's security is at threat, or the children's security, or even your own security is at threat, you would like to move away. So, you are pushed by that fear to other safe region. Crop failure or because of poverty. Now, these are the push factor that I discussed with you. Now, I would like to talk about the pull factor. What is pulling you from your place? Like, what pulls you from your comfort region to say so to other place? First is employment opportunities. Now you are working somewhere, but then if you get a better job opportunity with better pay, with better condition, with better services opportunity, then you are pulled to that place to go and settle there. The other one is better service provisions, better quality of life, safe surrounding, alternate work provision, better standard of living. These are some of the pull factor which pulls you from your place of residence to the place of destination. So that's why migration happens mostly, and all in all, if you look at it, people migrate for better life, better living condition. So having talked about the push and pull factor of migration, let us now look at the patterns of migration. What are the various patterns of migration? The pattern of migration in India can be divided into various analytical categories on the basis of causal factors which force migration, census figures and duration of migration. Let us now look at the three categories of migration. The first one would be involuntary migration. Now what do we mean by involuntary migration? As the name suggests, it is not voluntary, it is involuntary. So migration under the crisis such as war, transfer of population, floods, earthquakes, construction of hydel projects where you have to shift out your place. It could be also marriage. It could be any other of transfer migration, employment opportunities. These are known as involuntary migration. Now talking about the second categories is voluntary migration. What is voluntary migration? It means people move out in search of livelihood on their own terms. They are the one who are seeking migration. They are the one who are taking part in migration. Nobody forces them. It is just a pull factor, or the push factor which makes them migrate. It includes probably the cultivators, the traders, the salesmen, artisans, laborers, all these kind of people. Now the third categories of migrants are the transhumans migration. It is a special type of migration between two sets of settlements in different seasons. That is what we did in the beginning as well. Now Rao has constructed the category of migration on the basis of the causal factors, while Malavika Karlekar has constructed 4 migration streams on the basis of census figures, namely migration happens between number 1, rural to rural, second is rural to urban, third is urban to rural, and the fourth is urban to urban. So in turn, these 4 streams signify the direction of flow of the people. Now irrespective of the direction of the flow of the people, Malavika Karlekar has categorized migration into 4 sections on the basis of time spent by the migrants outside their place of residence. The first one is permanent migration. Migration moves from the area of birth for a lifetime, though some contact with the place of origin is maintained through visits on the occasion of marriage, death and other ritual occasions within the kin group. Now some of them might send the remittances, that is the earning, the salary or few money to the dependent family members. Second type is the temporary migration. Migrants who remain out of their home for a few months in a year come under this category. Now the third type of migrants are the seasonal or circular migration. It relates to short-term stay, normally under a year. Now outside the place of residence by those at the subsistent level, and it is likely to be repeated in the coming years as well. So this is seasonal. So you've got lots of masons, the carpenters, even the unskilled laborers who come during season. So that's a circular movement. So that is when they migrate and stay in the place of destination for some time and then go back home after earning a certain amount of money where there's a lull season, and then come back when there's a season. Now the fourth type is the return migration or relay migration. Different members of the same family migrate in turn outside their place of residence to earn some money for the family. This feature is common among the peasant families if you look at it. So this is the kind of migration, the fourth type of migration. Now having talked a lot about migration, now let us see migration from the tribal areas. In the light of the discussion that we just had of the various categories of migration, the migration of tribals from the central and eastern India has been divided into 3 categories. Number 1, seasonal migration or circular migration to the nearby towns, yearly or permanent migration to larger city for employment, and relay migration, that is family members going out in turns to earn livelihood. Now, it has been realized that migration is a process and the decision to migrate is the overall responsibility of the family and community in the context of tribal people in India. As we know that the tribals believe in collectivities, in their social norms, and some has been practiced in case of migration as well. The tribals are exposed to modern practices in society and social values, including the use of the modern technology in agriculture and allied activities through migration. But they hardly get the chance to practice the same in the place of origin, as they cannot afford the instruments nor they have the field of agriculture they can apply the techniques learned at the place of destination. However, they have learned a lot many things in the process of migration, which they are able to apply in their daily life towards the betterment to sustain their livelihood pattern. Now, having talked about migration and the tribals, let us look at the determinants of migration. What are the determinants of migration? Migration is a process through which the people move from one area to another areas to sustain their livelihood. Migration denotes any movement of groups or people from one locality to another with certain objectives. Migration is a movement of people from one defining area to another and cross over to the administrative boundaries during a given migration interval that involves a change of residence. As a result, the change in residence can take place either on permanent or semi-permanent or temporary basis. Since the year 1961, the internal migration is a process that engages a change of residence within national borders of a given country, and migration data is collected from every revenue village. Now, the Census of India calls a person migrant if his birthplace is different from the place of enumeration, that is, from the place where he earns his livelihood. And if the place of earning his livelihood is different from where he or she is born, then they are called as migrants as per the Census of India. Now, in 1971 census, an additional question on place of last residence was introduced to collect migration data. Since then, census provides data on migrants based on place of birth and place of last residence. Now, if the place of birth or place of last residence is different from the place of enumeration, a person is definitely defined as a migrant. However, if the place of birth and place of enumeration is the same, then the person is a non-migrant. The migrants are distinguished as permanent, semi-permanent and temporary, etc., depending on this census collection. Labor migration belongs to temporary migration, we have studied about that, as they stay away from the place of origin for more than just a few months in a year. The temporary migrants are also known as short duration migrants, or they are known as seasonal migrants or circulatory migrants. This is what we did or we studied. The reasons for migration are mainly employment related, purposes of business, better education, marriage, moving after birth, move with household, etc. The economic factors influence the process of migration, and it has impact on the process of development indicators, and it plays a pivotal role to eradicate the poverty. Why do people migrate? For a better standard of living. Why do people migrate? For employment. Why do people migrate? For sustainability. So all these aspects leads to a better life cycle, leads to a better upliftment of the people from the poor lifestyle that they would have been living. Now, in regards to the tribals, the migration of tribals from their regions or place of origins is not voluntary in India. In fact, most of them are forced out due to ecological degradation, landlessness and land alienation, as well as unemployment, lack of services and poverty. However, the propelling factor in such migration is to ensure survival for himself, for herself and for the family. Now, before we end up, let us sum up what we studied in today's session. In today's session, we did talk about migration, And we discussed about migration and defined migration as a shift in the place of residence for some length of time. And we even talked about the categories of migration, permanent migration, short-term migration, seasonal or circulatory migration. We also discussed about the different types of migrants from international to internal migration. We also talked about migration in India, which is primarily of two types, long-term migration, short-term migration that we just heard. We also discussed the push and pull factor along with the patterns of migration. We even mentioned about the migration from the tribal areas and the determinants of migration in the present class. Now we shall continue more about migration in the next session. Till then, you have a happy learning. Thank you.